You ever wonder how something as huge and ancient as a major world religion gets taught to a kid, like a 9-year-old? Well, today we're going to do just that. We're going to peek inside a 4th grade textbook for Islamic studies to see exactly how they break down these enormous ideas. So let's get into it.
So this is our source material for this whole explainer, Islamic Education Grade 4. It's published by a company called Dar es Salaam, and they say they're a global leader in Islamic books. We're basically just going to walk through it, page by page, and see how these really big, complex ideas get distilled down for kids.
And yeah, that really gets us to the big question we're asking today, right? How do you take a faith that's so vast, so ancient, and turn its core beliefs and practices into lessons a kid can actually understand? That's exactly what we're here to find out.
Okay, so first things first. What's the goal of a textbook like this? I think a good place to start is to look at what the publisher themselves said they were trying to do.
Well, right in the publisher's note, they say this whole series was made to fill what they call a dire need for Islamic studies material in English. And when you look at what's inside, the scope is, wow, it's huge. It's not just one thing. We're talking a full-on curriculum. It covers interpreting the Quran, the concept of one God, stories from the Prophet's life, and even, general etiquette for everyday life.
So with all that to cover, where do you even start? Well, the book goes right to the very beginning, the absolute cornerstone of the entire Islamic faith.
And bam, here we go. Chapter 1. They don't mess around. It jumps straight into the single most important lesson, monotheism, the belief that there's only one God, Allah. You can tell right away that this is the bedrock for everything else they're going to learn.
The book even gives them the specific Arabic word for it, tawheed, and it defines it immediately as the foundation of Islam and one of the essential articles of faith. So right from the get-go, it's made crystal clear to these kids that this idea is the most important one, it's non-negotiable.
And to make it super clear, the book gives them this key phrase, La ilaha illallah. This is basically the most well-known way to express tawheed. And the translation? It's really direct. It just means, there is nothing which deserves to be worshipped except Allah. This is presented as the central declaration of the faith.
So, okay, oneness. That's a pretty abstract idea for a 9-year-old, right? Well, this is how the textbook tackles it. It breaks it down into 3 parts. It teaches them that God's oneness isn't just about the number 1. It means He is one in His very being, one in His qualities, and one in His actions.
All right, so once they've established this idea of one God, what's next? How does the book start to explain who God is? Well, it does it by looking at His nature through His different names.
So the book introduces the kids to this concept called al-Asma al-Husna. That translates to the most beautiful names. And traditionally, there are 99 of them, and each one describes a totally different quality or attribute of God. And this is where things get, well, surprisingly detailed. For example, let's take 2 of the most common names, Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. Now, both have to do with mercy, but the book points out this really subtle difference. Ar-Rahman is described as an overflowing mercy. Think of it like a big burst of compassion. But Ar-Rahim is a permanent, everlasting kind of mercy. I mean, that's a pretty deep theological point to be teaching a 4th grader.
And here's how they make these big, abstract ideas feel real and personal. The whole idea of God's mercy isn't just some definition to memorize, it's tied directly to something every kid understands. Making a mistake, feeling bad about it, and then being forgiven. It really brings this high-level theology right down to a personal, everyday level.
Okay, so we've looked at the core beliefs, but faith isn't just about what you believe, it's about what you do. So now, let's check out how the textbook bridges that gap and connects theology to actual everyday actions and rituals.
And if you just look at the table of contents, you can literally see how the curriculum is structured. We saw the first chapters were all about God and the Quran. But then, look, it shifts gears and moves right into the practical stuff, the how-to of daily religious life. It just lays out all the core practices one by one.
And they cover a lot of ground here. You've got the big foundational pillars, like charity, which is zakah, fasting, called psalm, and the daily prayers, or salah. But it also gets into really practical, everyday things, like what foods are okay to eat, halal and haram, the rules for staying ritually clean, and even something as simple as the right way to greet people.
So, the final piece of the puzzle is, where does all this information and guidance actually come from? The book is super clear about the 2 main sources for everything it teaches. The kids are taught that all these beliefs and all these practices come from 2 key places. First up, you have the Quran, the holy book itself. And you can see there are specific lessons just for understanding certain chapters or surahs. The second source is the life and the example of the Prophet Muhammad, who's presented as God's final messenger. And again, if you look at the chapters, there are a bunch of them dedicated just to his life story.
So when you step back and look at the whole thing, you see this really methodical approach, right? It goes from the most abstract idea imaginable, the oneness of God, all the way down to the most practical daily thing, like how to say hello. And seeing that really leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. How does learning about your faith and your life through a curriculum that's this structured, how does that ultimately shape the way a child sees the world?